So, Pixar's Disney Plus show, Win or Lose, is making some news, more news, right? And we'll talk about the old news. The show's making some news because it has featured Disney's first Christian character in almost 20 years. Of course, this is the Pixar show, original show. It focused on a co-ed middle school softball team named the Pickles. And the character in question, pictured here on screen to my left here, or at my right, your left. This character is Lori. She's the right fielder of the team as well as the daughter of Coach Dan. And the whole show is built around this idea of kind of following each character and kind of seeing like their perspective on things and their inner life, and it's very expressionistic in that way. And the episode of her character is introduced with her beginning with quote unquote Heavenly Father, right? And you know, Disney's has had a touch and go relationship with religion, but more specifically Christianity, right? You know, I shouldn't even say touch and go. I should say like a seemingly paradoxical relationship. Because on one hand, again, it's rarely explicit. But at the same time, Disney as a company, having been founded by, you know, white American men a century ago, all of the company's work is infused with just a generalized American Protestant worldview, right? You know, and it's not even like, oh, they're sneaking in Christian themes or anything. That's not what I'm saying, but more so that, you know, the dominant power within like a group. So like, you know, I guess what would be the opposite of marginalized communities? I don't want to say the oppressor communities, but perhaps, right? Like, they often, and I could say this, and this is something I've had to unlearn. I myself am a straight white Christian man, right? That you kind of assume your state of being is the default, right? So, and that's like the classic, like if I'm telling a story and it's about a white guy, I'm like, oh yeah, that guy. But if it's about a black guy, you'll be like, oh, this black guy, right? Like as if whiteness, manness, Christianness is just the default and doesn't even bear acknowledgement in a sense, right? So it doesn't explicitly ever really depict Christianity or explore ideas related to Christianity, but it's never really presenting Jewish people or Muslim, you know, characters, right? Again, they've been doing a little bit more recently, but it's on the whole, right? The last major Christian depiction in a Disney film was 2007's Bridge to Terabithia. You know, the main characters at one point in the film attend church together and then they discuss religion. Of course, in a accessible, in a way that would be accessible to children. Notably, though, that film was not like a Disney invention. It was based on a pre-existing book. And that was an era when Disney, again, did not, you know, was still struggling to kind of, you know, figure out its identity in this period. So, you know, that's kind of almost moot. You know, you know, not a super helpful example. So, Peter, why are you talking about this? Who cares? Well, this is interesting to see. Especially, you know, like full disclosure to my viewers, I am Catholic. I was raised Catholic. I consider myself fairly devout. I consider myself, though, a leftist, right? So, which a lot of people feel like it contradicts. Like, if you're Christian, you must also be conservative, and that's not me at all. But that's also not because I'm on the left, that means I compromise in Catholic values. Like, I have this weird, I mean, if you really want to know, you can ask me about it. But, so I say all this to put front, like, I am not, you know, hating on Christianity, right? I'm not just someone who is Catholic. Like, I am still consider myself very devout, and it's something that's really important to me. But this feels hypocritical because if you recall, and you can find my video about this on the channel, I did it on Christmas Eve, no less. This show made news before its release, because right before release, they removed a storyline involving a transgender character from this same show. And at the time, Disney and Pixar said, quote, "When it comes to animated content for a younger audience, we recognize that many parents would prefer to discuss certain subjects with their children on their own terms and timeline," end quote. This is 100% politically motivated. I talked about it in that video. I've talked about it in some other videos about Disney recently, especially their move, along with many other American corporations, of abandoning DEI efforts and diversity and things like that. That in this new climate of Trump being reelected, either to avoid attack from Trump or to cater to what seems like an American majority, Disney would rather cater to conservatives and Christians and throw trans people under the bus and queer people in general. And there's a lot of examples within the past year of Disney actively playing down queer elements in their media or actively removing them. This again, I'm going to read this quote again. And if you've watched my channel before, you'll know how I feel about this. But I'm going to explain it again for anyone new out there. Quote, "When it comes to animated content for a younger audience, we recognize that many parents would prefer to discuss certain subjects with their children on their own terms and timeline." End quote. Again, there's a lot to unpack there. And it goes back to what I was saying about centering a certain kind of identity as the default. It's default to be a man and identify as a man, or a woman and identify as a woman. It is other to be trans. So that's number one. Number two, this reinforces this idea that discussing things like being queer, or being gay, or being trans, or just issues with race in this country, we don't want to, that's not appropriate for our kids. Especially again talking about transgender people, that's not appropriate, which would suggest that being transgender is perverse. Now, plenty of people think that, but then you're just transphobic. But then just own it, right? But people try to use euphemistic language of like, parents might want to discuss certain subjects, with their children on their own terms. Couldn't you say the same thing about religion? Like, if anything, and again, I say this as a devout Catholic, there's no shortage of support for Christians. I know there's this whole idea that Christians are being marginalized and silenced in this country. It's just not true, because the power structures aren't there, right? The power structures do not, no child is struggling with their Christian faith and has no one to talk to, and their family doesn't understand them, right? I'm sorry. An 8-year-old, I'm sure there's been plenty of stories, but on the whole, there's not a lot of 8-year-olds who are secretly Christian and trying to wrestle with this and their family. No, if you're an 8-year-old and you're a Christian, your whole community is Christian. You have no shortage of support there. You already have cultural hegemony. By contrast, and I talked about this in my video about this show removing the transgender storyline, is, trans children are trans, whether the parents are want to discuss this with them or not. So being able to have representation, and especially if you look at the cut content, it was this really elegant way of explaining without words what it feels like to feel like a stranger in your own body. That would be, I would imagine, and again, I say this from my removed vantage point as being a cisgendered man, I feel like that would be really important. Just for to begin your self-conception of what it is you're even experiencing. I feel like that is a lot more important. And also, it doesn't really matter what the parents want, what subjects they want to discuss with their children and at what times. Whereas religion, that's a really big concept that maybe you should be saving. And that's one of my criticisms of the Catholic Church, that, we just we baptize babies and then we kind of just send them into Catholic school and whatever. And it's like this idea of you're supposed to be willingly choosing when you're a conscious adult, a rational adult, choosing the faith. And most of the church, at least the Catholic Church, are people who are very passive and they were just baptized, right? That seems more like something that, you parents should prefer to discuss at a later date on their terms and timeline, right? So again, it's just a complete hypocrisy. And here's again the thing: I'm not bagging on Christianity. This is not a critique of Christianity or religion. This is a critique of Disney deciding what is appropriate for children and what is not. And more so, because really it's not about what everyone thinks is appropriate. It's about what a specific segment of the population thinks is appropriate. Being Christian and being trans are not mutually exclusive, right? You could have this show and have Lori be a Christian, and then you have this other character, I forget their name, be trans, right? So it's a bad look when you decide to keep one, because I'm sure both were conceived of from the beginning. I don't think they cut the transgender part and then added the Christian part. I'm sure these were both there from the beginning. But again, the fact, like both of these can be and should be featured, because it makes the story more diverse and interesting and have different kind of lived experiences. But the fact that they kept one and cut the other really illustrates where Disney's priorities lie. And it's just really sad and unfortunate. And I've become very zealous about this in like the past year or so. I don't know why. I've never been super, I grew up Catholic, so I kind of, probably was transphobic's maybe the wrong word, but like didn't understand it, and therefore was kind of like, oh, that I don't really support that. That doesn't really make sense. In like the past year, I something is just like clicked, or maybe the past couple of years. And so if you watch this channel, like anytime this comes up, I just get really upset because it's just so obvious that Disney, who a huge part of its fan base is the queer community, in the past year, Disney's really shown their true colors. And I don't care how many Pride nights they have at Disney World and how many first openly gay Disney characters that they have, because there's been like a bunch of first openly gay. I don't care, because you're showing, because when it comes to money, if it's you only will support these communities and these ideas and issues when it's convenient, and the second it's not, they throw it out. Wow, what an interesting story. I'm sure you have some thoughts about the topic, so comment below, let me know what you think. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It really, really helps people find the channel and makes me feel all warm inside. Until next time, I'm Peter Mancuso. Peace out.